I have worked with and mentored teens for over 20 years. I valued connected time with teenagers that I mentored. And as soon as I brought that into my work with clients, it completely changed my business.
People seem to be afraid or a little bit intimidated around teenagers. There must have been difficult situations, some upsetting or real challenges.
I have a very honest answer about that.
If there was a secret ingredient that made your work either unique or very attractive and why people are drawn to you and your business, what do you think that secret ingredient would be?
You do have to have a deep-seated empathy for humanity, I think, in order to do portraits.
I found the most success with doing portraits is that first 5 minutes of observation. Give us an idea of what your posing workflow looks like.
There's a couple of tricks that I've learned in terms of making sure that they're comfortable. One of those is...
Welcome to the Mood Podcast, uncovering the art of conversation, one frame at a time. I'm your host, Matt Jacob, and thank you for joining me in today's conversation. And in this episode, we spoke with Mary Vance, a Seattle-based photographer known for her inclusive and authentic approach to portrait photography, especially with high school seniors. Mary shared how her sessions are designed to make each subject feel genuinely seen and valued, highlighting her commitment to creating a safe and welcoming environment for teens of all backgrounds. We explored her journey of balancing the demands of photography business while staying true to her creative vision, including how adding video has really expanded her artistic and commercial work. Mary also shared her dedication to teaching and advocacy, diving into how she supports her students and incorporates advocacy into her client relationships. She also discussed her personal contradictions, such as being both an introvert and deeply people-focused, and how these traits shape her creative approach, as well as the inspiration and experiences behind her motto, authentic, natural, connected. Additionally, Mary Vance opened up about her philosophy on the balance between the right gear and maintaining a strong artistic vision, explaining how she chooses equipment that supports really her creative goals. She also shared some inspiring stories about building meaningful relationships in her career and the impact these connections have had on her work. Our conversation was a deep dive into photography, authenticity, and the power of human connection. So now I bring you Mary Vance. Mary Vance, welcome to the Mood Podcast. Thank you so much for jumping on with me today.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's dive right in. The first thing that I wanted to talk about, because it's I wouldn't say plastered across your website, but it's a clear identity that I found when I was looking more into you and your work. And it was a few words. It was authentic, natural, connected. Can you kind of elaborate a little bit more on those type of brand identities?
Yeah, the word authentic especially kind of got a bad rap for a little while there, like people were, tossing around there like, oh, authentic. Okay. I had a video coach. She was coaching me on storytelling for my films that I make, for the videos that I make and whatnot. And so I joined this mastermind or whatever. And I was like, oh, here are my, like identifiers, here are my keywords. And one of them is authentic. And she was like, wah, wah. She literally made that noise to me and said, she's like, oh, you really can't put that on anything. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to write it out. And so I did. It's going really well because, turns out that once people realized what my version of authenticity was, it was something that was really going to resonate with them as well. And so, I do, authentic, meaning who you truly are. And especially in terms of photography and my subjects, all portraits. So authentic, who you really are. Natural, I'm not, taking you outside of your normal range of movement. I'm not making you, like go bouldering if you're, like wearing high heels or things like that, like natural range of movement. Things that, I'm putting you in situations that you would actually really be in, right? So true to who you are is the authenticity. The natural piece is, I'm putting you in a place that you would really be. Like, I would actually go take a hike here with my friends, and we just kind of, like tool around. And the connected piece is the piece that really became kind of a cornerstone of my business and my philosophy, because so many people are afraid of teenagers, and I work almost exclusively with teenagers. And there's seems to be this barrier in terms of, age, when we go or start thinking about adolescence, or maybe it's even some of our own traumas that we're carrying from our own adolescence, right? And teenagers are scary. I don't want to, be in that. And the connected piece comes in the fact that I'm not afraid to embrace a teenager where they really are.
And so, how did these words and these identities, more like philosophies, I guess, in your professional, personal way of living, how did they come about? Where was the genesis of these types of philosophies?
Yeah, I started working with teenagers fresh out of high school, when I was still, technically a teenager myself. And so I have worked with and mentored teens for over 20 years at this point. And so that was the genesis. It was, these were the kids that were coming over to my house. They were, eating my food and jumping on my couch. I talk about that all the time because I'm still bitter about the fact that they broke my couch. But these were kids that I was just like doing life with. And then, you start a business, and right, I feel like first year photographers, are kind of like, okay, I have to know all the right editing. I have to know all the right gear. I have to know all the this, right? And I started down that path, and then kind of had some really wise mentors who leaned in and were like, no, 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 that stuff will fade, if you don't have a purpose. And it kind of evolved from there to say, well, these are the things that I was doing already in my everyday life. This was what my mission was. This is what I valued. I valued connected time with the teenagers that I mentored. And as soon as I brought that in to my work with clients and took that same approach, it was just, I mean, absolutely, 180 in terms of how passionate I was about the work that I was doing and how excited I was to go to every single photo shoot. And, yeah, it completely changed my business.
Yeah, that type of passion is contagious, right? And not just within the photography community or within other professions that are similar, but much more so on the client side, right? If you're working with a customer and a client, they can see that passion. They can really see that desire and that just enthusiasm to have that purpose and to stick by it. Often photographers, and maybe you can touch on this as well, but they get, like you said, when you start, you get wrapped up with lots of different things, and then you get wrapped up with what's my style and what's my voice and what am I trying to do. But I think once you are clear and have that clarity around your purpose and around your vision and around, okay, this is me, this is where I'm comfortable, it kind of just leaves everything else aside, and you can really focus on what's important, which is connecting with your models, your subjects, the people you're photographing, or the environments, whatever it might be. So, on that note, and you mentioned this earlier, what people seem to be afraid or a little bit intimidated or whatever it might be, nervous around teenagers. Why do you think that is? Why is that in your experience?
Um, well, I have a very honest I have a very honest answer about that. Teenagers will not suffer anyone's bullshit. And that is really intimidating if you have this, oh, here's my facade, this is me in profession, like work mode, but you're not being, genuine with them in any way. And I think that's really intimidating. And they also can sense our insecurities, and that's a vulnerable place to potentially be, you know. Finally, I mean, sometimes too, like the experience, I think, with teenagers is like, you go into a coffee shop right when school is left out, and you see like a little group of teenagers, right? And that's a really intimidating thing because they're all like in it, with each other. And it's kind of like observing some, anthropological study, right? And so I think, depending on what other photographers, kind of experience has been with teenagers, they haven't had the opportunity to see them when the walls are down, right? And instead of like, like out in public or whatever, or they have some of their own insecurities themselves that they're maybe still carrying from, from middle school or from high school or things like that. And it's hard to think back to what was that time like, especially if you have any wounds that you need to heal around that age or that time in your life.
Yeah, and you talk like you. I mean, we all have experience of being teenagers, but you talk as if you are so connected with that memory and the feeling of being a teenager. Touch upon a little bit more detail about your background and how you got into photography. And it's really interesting the way you kind of grew up with it as a teenager and you started photographing back then. If I'm correct, can you explain a little bit about your the starting years
The
in photography?
background, actually, no, I didn't pick up a camera. I didn't get a DSLR until 2011 was when I got my first DSLR. What I was doing before that, though, I had a 25-year long career as a dancer, and I taught dance for a decade before before I left the dance world behind. And so teaching dance choreography, highly artistic, but who was I working with the entire time that I was teaching? Those same teenagers, right? So I'm in that, they're coming in every single week and they're with me and, and again, the walls are down because when teach somebody for multiple years at a time and you're seeing them every single week, right? You're really getting to know who they are, not only as an athlete, or as an artist, because dance combines both athletics and art, but also who they are as as a person, kind of what makes them tick. So I gave up dance when I moved across the country. So I moved from North Carolina to Seattle, Washington, a while back, and gave up dance. I had two little children, and it was kind of that first year there was just honestly, it was just miserable. Um, there's no other way to say it. I had left my entire support system. I was, this little Southern gal who thought that I was going to be, that the house that I had bought, I was going to live in forever and be buried in the backyard, or whatever.
How old were you at this time?
It was 2010, so I was 26 when we moved. Yeah. And yeah, two little kids, left my support structure and everything, moved it 3,000 miles away. And then, and all of this, the Zoom calls and the, FaceTime, it didn't exist. And so, it was just phone calls or writing letters home,
Landline calls.
landline calls.
Landline calls.
I did not have a smartphone, so I mean, like it was 2010. Yeah, I just found myself after that first year in a creative rut. I was used to having massive amounts of connection, with kids teaching dance like 4 or more nights a week, right? Multiple classes a week. So I'd have 100 or more kids that I was always like working with constantly. My entire family, all my friends, everything. I had a huge community and then moved away and sucked right the void out of that. Um, so we had been there for 1 year, and my husband got a little bonus. He got like a little 1 year anniversary bonus or whatever. And instead of doing anything smart with it, we both said that we wanted to get a toy. and, and so and so his was, I have no idea what his was. Mine was a camera, and I had a friend of mine who was a photographer in North Hollywood in California. And I called her, and I didn't even have the vocabulary around it to say, I need something that has a high shutter speed. I just said, I need a camera that moves as fast as my youngest child. Because we had always called that kid the blur because you just couldn't, I mean, like they just moved too fast. And I didn't even know to say like shutter speed is is a problem, or didn't know anything about exposure. And so she coached me and to get my first DSLR. And then I started trying to photograph my kids and found out real quick that I didn't have the patience for it, and neither did they. So, it segued pretty quickly into senior photography because those were the kids that I loved spending time with. And they had absolutely all the patience in the world. They're like, oh my gosh, you got a new lens? Will you bring it, to group tonight? Will you bring it to small group tonight? And I'm sure. And they're like, oh yeah, let's go do this. Can we go to a park and take photos? And I was like, yes, I would love to go practice and do this. So yeah, it went senior specific pretty quickly.
Do they still have that kind of enthusiasm now that they've got smartphones and Instagram and TikTok? Or yeah, they do.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, and now that they have Instagram and TikTok and, everybody always has a camera in their hand, but they also know the difference between a good photo and you know, a Snapchat selfie, right?
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
I think that is, I don't think that'll ever lose its appeal.
Hi, everyone. Just a really quick break in the podcast to tell you about something that's been a game changer for my own work. You know, I'm all about creating content that's impactful and visually stunning. And a big part of that is thanks to Artlist. I use Artlist for all the dramatic cinematic music you see in the trailers, and that brings all my other videos to life. And their massive library of high quality stock footage and sound effects is honestly a lifesaver. Whether you're a filmmaker, content creator, or photographer, Artlist has everything you need to take your projects to the next level. What I love most about Artlist, though, is how easy it makes finding the perfect asset. I'm super lazy, and their platform is super user-friendly. And the quality of their music and footage is just top-notch. It doesn't matter if you're working on a big project or just something small, Artlist certainly has the range and the quality to make your work really stand out. Plus, everything is royalty free, so you can use it however you like without worrying about the legal stuff. And because I believe in sharing the good stuff, here's a little perk for you. Use the link in the description to sign up for an annual plan, and you'll get 2 extra months free. It's a great deal to keep your creative juices flowing even longer. All right, let's get back to the episode. Yeah, let's not dive into let's not dive into social media. But yeah, there's an interesting point. I think you can, we all know you can take good photos on an iPhone. We've seen it, but that it's lovely and refreshing to hear that the seniors. And I want to clarify this just for non-American listeners and watchers. Seniors, as in senior high school children, right? So what age are we talking? 18.
Yes, 17 or 18. Although the very first time that I went to a conference, I tell people this all the time. My very first conference that I ever went to, I had no direction. It was just like, oh, let me take this, and this, and stuff all over the gambit, across the genre range. And one of them said, watch me edit seniors. And that was that was the title of the class. And I went in thinking that I was going to learn how to Photoshop wrinkles off a pensioner, or like that it was going to be octogenarians and, and like those really gritty black and whites. I always tell people I was so shocked when I went in and I was like, wait, these are like my kids, like the kids that are in my house. And, and that was the day that I was like, oh, okay, there's a whole market for this. This is what I'm doing. So, yeah.
Cool. Um, yeah, because when I first found out about you and talked, obviously talking a lot about senior photography, I was like, I don't see any old people here. And then it clicked, obviously. But yeah, it's refreshing to hear that these seniors, want to, or at least recognize the difference and still appreciate the art form, the process, the technology that is professional photography, professional cameras. So yeah, that's really refreshing to hear. So when you're out shooting and you have a job come up or you're out shooting and practicing seniors, how do you maintain, I mean, assuming you've done a lot of it, right? How do you maintain that creative spark? How do you maintain that kind of, not originality, but a uniqueness to each shoot? What's your process about going about that?
Yeah. I have a very, very short intake questionnaire so that I know essentially one thing before I go into the shoot. Well, I know maybe three things. I always know their name. I know their pronouns because I ask it on their sheet. And then the other question, the only other personal question that I ask on my intake form is, and a lot of times it's a parent who's filling out this intake form, and it just says, "Tell me about your senior." And it's very open ended. That's it. Tell me about your senior. And sometimes I get, a list of the, like transcript or resume kind of, they do this, they do this, they do this. But what I find is that most of the time, whatever's most important to that kid, the parent's going to tell me. So I have a little bit of knowledge before I go in. And then the question of how do I make this unique? Um, this might sound like a backwards answer. I use structure so that I can be creative. Does that make sense? So I have a posing workflow that I can work through, and it's just on autopilot at this point because of the, I always go to known locations. I know where the light is. I know what time the sun's going to go behind this mountain, what time the tree line is going to interfere with this, or if I can get by shooting earlier in the day because of, said features, or, oh, if it's cloudy, then I can flip them around and I can do this here. So taking those bits of structure puts that side of my brain on autopilot. And the piece then that makes it the most unique is that my conscious mind is free to actually engage with and talk and connect. That's the only piece that's going to be different from within every single photo shoot, is that you have a different person in front of you. I can take the exact same person, and you've probably seen this on YouTube where they'll take the same person and have 6 different photographers photograph them, right? And they'll see, like you see it's entirely different, even if it's the same subject, every photographer's, interpretation of it is much different. And so this is kind of that in reverse, is that I'm taking, same photographer, same posing workflow, same locations. And so the thing that becomes the most unique is the person themselves. And I think that makes a more beautiful portrait than really, than, oh gosh, what did we joke about? Kids renting a helicopter to paraglide into a remote mountain location so that they get a place that none of their friends had. And I'm like, that doesn't matter. That level of uniqueness, it doesn't matter if you're connected to the person that's in front of you.
Yeah, totally agree. It's very important with portraits. But what is also important, you mentioned it, is having a toolkit, right? Especially with posing, to able to kind of think about it as, not even think about it as second nature. Tell us a little bit, without giving away your trade secrets. Give us an idea of what your posing workflow looks like. I think it'd be of great interest to people who like to do portraits.
Yeah. And I generally do just give it away. Honestly, there's a point where I say, okay, I can photograph X number of kids a year, right? And I have every confidence that the people who need me to be their photographer will find me. But I also think of all of the hundreds of thousands of kids who will graduate just in the US just this year. And I'm like, I want them to find somebody who sees them the exact same way. So I don't gatekeep. I don't hold pretty much anything close to the vest anymore. I just share it all, and I know that it will reach the people that it needs to reach. I'll even teach people that are like right within, I've taught people who have been less than 5 miles from me, and I don't even care. I'm like, no, I'll teach you my methods. It's fine. I was like, there's more than enough for
Well, this could be a
everybody to go
long
around.
conversation, right? Well, let's start
Yes.
from the top.
Yeah, sorry. Workflow posing. I always just try to keep it with a natural range of motion, right? So I start observing my seniors from the minute that they walk up to me, right? I notice and pay attention to how they're walking. This is where that dance background comes in. And so basically, I divide everything into standing, sitting, and walking, right? And so seated poses are very easy for people to get comfortable in to begin with. I always say, gentlemen will sit comfortably on just about anything, and they'll just like relax right into it. And so that's a good way for them to get comfortable with me before I have the camera right in front of their face. So seated poses, standing, which you can also do kind of like perch, use different, natural elements in the Pacific Northwest, which is where I've had my business for over a decade. There's no shortage of rocks and trees and fences and just every kind of natural aspect you could possibly think of. It's beautiful. And then walking is just to introduce movement, right? Because when their brain is tied up on doing something else, right, then it kind of frees them up a little bit to have a little bit more relaxed nature, right? If they're thinking, they're like, oh, okay, oh, I'm just walking. Okay, that's cool, and then you'll see it on their face. And so that's the three tricks right there.
Mm. I think that one thing, the one thing I've found the most success with doing portraits is that first 5 minutes of observation. And they might be thinking, well, what do I do? But if you can distract them from the actual shoot with a coffee or drink or just chat, right? And while you're chatting, you may not be 100% listening. You might just be observing, okay, how do they move? Let's sit down. And how would they normally sit in a very relaxed pose? So many times I have models, or I don't know what we call the models, subject, people we photograph sit down and they're like, okay, how do you want me to sit? It's like, oh, well, just however you'd normally sit. Let's look at that first. It might be great. Sometimes they sit perfectly and relax and they just fit into it. And other times, maybe not. And then we have to. So I think that observation is, in my experience anyway, and you kind of reiterated that, it's can be very, very useful just in a very short space of time, whether they're walking, sitting, or whatever they might be doing.
There's also a piece of it where you said like, that first 5 minutes, that observation is key, right? There's a couple of tricks that I've learned in terms of making sure that they're comfortable right off the bat, right from that first interaction. One of those is I do multiple outfits, right? So I want to give them a win as quickly as I can, like something that I can compliment them on or boost their confidence about as quick. So, me saying like something that they did right. And then I also, in terms of comfort, I want them to be able to do something immediately that they're like, oh, okay, I got that. I did that properly. Right. And so, I asked them to take me through their outfits. And so let's say that they're wearing three outfits, three different outfits for this photo shoot. All of their clothing is a known entity to them. It's also easier for a person to talk about an inanimate object, right? Like than it is to talk about themselves. And so that's a comfort thing. So I'm giving them the opportunity to be the expert in something, right? To tell me like, okay, this is what I thought. I was thinking I would wear this, and I was thinking I'd wear this, and I was thinking I'd wear this. And then I give them the chance to have a win. Oh, do you know what? Okay, at this location, this outfit, we're going to use this last because this is going to be perfect. I can't believe you picked that to go for here, right? And so it's confidence, it's allowing them to be the expert in something, right? Because they're talking about their wardrobe or whatever, like their shoes. Oh my gosh, shoes can be huge,
Really?
Yeah, especially for teenagers, and yeah, no, the shoes are a big deal. And so sometimes I'll have like, four different, well, which pair do you think I should go with? I'd be like, okay, well, so we'll be at this location for this. How comfortable are you walking on rocks? And then there might be, oh, you know what? Let's do this. And then they're in a position of authority. They're becoming the expert. They're telling me what they're comfortable with, and those walls are breaking down. So that's a trick that I use right at the beginning too.
And with some of the most sensitive people, right? That the 17, 18 years old, it's very sensitive age where you have to be so empathetic and rewarding and inclusive, right? I mean, I definitely couldn't do it. So so much respect to you for photographing these youngsters, but clearly you get fantastic results by the look of your work. So that's incredible. Does that even go into techniques to allow and to set up an environment for these teenagers to be seen and heard, not just look good, but also, really understood in terms of what the photographs end up as? Or is there other layers to that?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. Um, some of it, honestly, some of it is personality of myself. You used the word empathetic before. And that's a key component of, of myself and how I operate. So I wouldn't just say, oh no, anybody could, like, you do have to have, kind of a deep seated empathy for humanity, I think, in order to do portraits effectively.
Those tools then that you use to allow the individual or groups, I guess, but the individual to feel comfortable in your presence before you, I guess, even take a shot. Is that also the same technique you might use, or are there other techniques you might use to get a little bit deeper and create an environment for the individual to be seen and heard, not just necessarily look good and feel comfortable?
Yeah. Um, I think at that point, what you're talking about in terms of tools that you can use is really good client education. And, you probably just even perusing my website, right? And that doesn't mean, just because somebody lands on my website doesn't mean that they're going to be my client, but they get a client guide, that talks through, like, hey, this is how your session's going to flow. I'm going to ask you questions, or I'm going to do this. And then, the rest of your client education, some people would call it marketing, right, becomes, on your socials and in the blog posts that you write. And basically anywhere that you're showing up, anywhere that I'm showing up, I'm always sending the message, I am safe. I am safe. I am safe. Right. And I will share details that I'm allowed to share, or I'll go straight to camera, for a little story after a photo session. Right. And the kids that are going to be photographed by me, they're probably already following me on, on social, or their mom is or something. And so I'm saying, like, oh my gosh, we had this fantastic session tonight. This kid loved D&D. I had no idea, like, what I was talking about, but with D&D, but I talked to my kids a little bit before that, and we played a game. And I was like, so we did storytelling throughout the entire session. And I was like, I had so much fun. And so I'm opening the door for, oh, that's kind of, like a little niche thing that you might not see in a portrait, or whatever. And so everywhere that I'm educating or doing any kind of marketing, I'm always talking about things like, "You're safe with me," or I'll pin, like for the local schools that I work a lot in. I'll go through and, like this kid, got an award for something, and they send out, like they send out the school send out like little emails and stuff like that. Or, you'll see them tagged on Instagram, and I'll like post and be like, look at this kid. This was so awesome. I'm so proud of them, so they know it's more than just the photo shoot. Right. And then the other thing that I do, and this is just, I don't know if this is a tool so much as it's something that helps me as, as a photographer, more so than maybe helping the subject, is I write down, I make a little list at the beginning of every season. I have a very like tight season, but I make a little list and I write every kid's name down that I'm going to photograph on a list, and I keep that list on my desk for the entire season, so that I am constantly like thinking about these kids and sending them, all the light and good energy that I can, like especially around exam times, or things that I know that are kind of going on, in their lives, just being a member of the community and being a part of the community that I work in. And so I do that for me, and that keeps me really connected to them as well. So
Yeah. Wow, wonderful. That's some real insights there I haven't even thought of, and how powerful branding, essentially branding with transparency, can give so much education to the client before you even either book in or before you even shoot, so that they already feel like they know you a little bit, and they already feel a level of comfort that, okay, Mary Vance is going to like give me the best opportunity to show who I am, and put me in the best light, both literally and figuratively. So that's really cool. I never really thought about that in terms of, I guess that's a use of social media and the digital world we live in today, right?
that's a key for me with social media. If I'm not building community or actually being more social with anyone, if social media becomes a thing for me where it's leading to negativity and bad thoughts and stuff like that, then I've spent too much time focusing on the wrong things within my algorithm. And so I
Yeah.
tell people all the time, I'm like, my
Yeah.
social media is happy, happy, happy. I was like, it's wonderful. I'm like, oh, look, y'all went to homecoming dance this weekend. Look at your dress. Love it. Love it. And I get to be like, it's a happy place for me, because I make it actually social. I'll reach out and be like, oh my gosh, I saw that, saw that you just made oh gosh, I had a gal a couple years ago. Their basketball team was playing in the state championship for basketball, and she made a half court shot at the buzzer. She just threw it, and it went in, and their team won the state championship. She's a Division 1 basketball player in college now, and but just that moment, it was just like, oh my gosh, and so like I put that all over my stories that week. I was like, look at this kid. And then later, she's like, thank you so much for, like actually paying attention to what I did in my life. And I was like, it's something that you live for. So of course it's going to be important to me too.
Yeah. Your connection and integration into and interest in their lives clearly comes across in your work, and that's often the missing part that a lot of photographers might be searching for, to actually really take a genuine, we go back to authenticity, genuine interest in these kids' lives that you're photographing, in order to make them feel empowered, seen, heard, make them look good, and at the end of the day get good photographs, right? That you're paid for. So that's really, really fantastic and inspirational to see and hear.
I
Now,
do want to, before we move on, I do want to add one thing here because this is actually really important to me. Um, I have very good boundaries, and I don't want anybody listening to this podcast to think like, oh, you need to go be best friends with some 17 and 18-year-olds in order to get good photos of them. No, that's not true. I have very good boundaries around like what I share of myself. The point of this is that I am open to what they want to share with me. Right. And so, like, it's not like I said, like, we don't have to be best friends with teenagers, right? That to me, honestly, would seem a little bit unprofessional, but they know that I am safe and that they can bring their whole self, to the photo shoot and stuff like that. But I'm not going to be, as a 40-year-old woman, I'm not going to be like talking to them, about like my own personal stuff, right? They're for good professional boundaries. So I don't want anybody to be afraid and be like, I don't want to go be friends with 17-year-olds. And I'm like, no, that's not what you have to do. I mean, like, if you're called to be, like mentor and be more involved in stuff like that, but even a mentorship, kind of relationship that is based in, good, strong boundaries, right? Around what you can and what you can't pour into that. And it's totally okay for photographers if they're just getting into senior photography or any type of, working with clients. It's totally okay to show up 100% for the person who's in front of your camera today, and then show up 100% for the next person the next day, right? It doesn't lessen anyone's experience if you are, being there for this person today and then being here for this next person, the next day. And so I don't want anybody to think like, oh, I can't be friends with that many people, or, again, don't want to be friends with a teenager. And I'm like, I don't ever want anybody to mishear, what I'm getting at with this. But so that's just always a clarifying point that I like to say, like, you can have good boundaries and still be a safe person. You can be open to seeing somebody and still, and not necessarily pour your own, story and your own stuff onto them.
yeah, absolutely. Glad you made that clear. That there's a point of diminishing returns with this anyway. I mean, imagine shooting your best friend all the time. It just doesn't. You're not gonna get the photos. You have to have that professional boundary, of course. So yeah, thanks for clarifying. Um, you talked about kind of the happy vibes that you surround yourself with, and just thinking about the amount of shoots that you've done with seniors and over so many years, there must have been some difficult situations, some maybe some upsetting or real challenges with the seniors that you've photographed. Can you think of any example that might come to the forefront of your mind, and if so, what did you learn from that?
Yeah, actually, as soon as you said that, I was like, "Oh, I know exactly the challenging situation." Actually, no, there's 2. I'll choose to talk about one first. Um, I had a senior, gentleman who his mother had said just said he's not really excited about having his photo taken. And I was like, "Okay, that's fine." And, and this was actually kind of early. I wasn't that far in. I don't think probably like year 2 or maybe year 3. And so, like did the photos. And at one point I think I got like a little bit too close. I was probably shooting on primes. And so, like I was leaning in a little bit more. Um, and he growled at me. And I was kind of like, oh, and like I immediately like stepped back and, and pulled back out of this, scenario or whatnot. And, and I was like, okay. And I was like, you know what? Let's move. I was like, let's change this. Right. And so just rolling with, okay, there's something that's making you not comfortable here that you would be like, and like, okay, all right. So moved, went along the rest of the photo shoot. When his mom got the photos, she sent me a thank you. Thank you so much. I never thought that I would have, this type of photos of this kid. And I was like, all right. And then a few years later, brought me the younger sibling. And and this kid was very into it. And I went into it thinking like, oh gosh, this is the only teenager that's ever growled at me, before. Like, what am I going to get again? And so I was kind of like, all right, like stealing myself for this to be horrendous. and, and while he was changing his outfit, his mom said, I appreciate so much the photos that you took of his older brother. And I was like, "Oh, yeah, how is this kid doing? Like, how's he doing? Like just kind of catching up and showing an interest and whatnot." And she said, "Well," she said, "he's so much better now." And she said, "When you photographed him, that was just a few months after his twin brother had passed away." And I had no idea. And and so this kid had obviously been going through a lot. Now, what did that teach me, right, in that scenario is that this is not just that scenario. This is a lot in life too. So often we think it's about us, and it's not about us. It was not that I had probably broken whatever he wanted his personal bubble of comfort to be. I'm usually pretty good about noticing, like if people step, like if you step towards them and they step back, I usually, I'm pretty good about noticing what your personal space bubble needs to be. Um, and so I was like, "Oh, what did I do? Like, did I make him angry? Right? Did I do this? Did I do something wrong? Did I make him uncomfortable? Whatever it was." And what that scenario taught me is it's not always about us. And if we can get out of our own way of thinking about it's always about us, as opposed to something else is going on in this kid's life, right now. And we don't know everything, as open and as welcoming as we can be. We're never going to know everything about this kid, and what's going on. And so what it taught me is don't take it personally, right? And then always consider the fact before you jump to, being kind of offended, that somebody was rude, right? Or what have you. Don't jump to that. The place to go with that is going, oh, okay. If they're reacting this way, there's probably something that's going on with them.
Wow, what a yeah, uh, great lesson for life. More than just, I mean, shoot, photographing people is a very difficult endeavor, right? And photographing teenagers is even more difficult. Photographing a teenager's just lost a twin brother, whether you knew that or not, is nigh on impossible, right? It's a very difficult scenario. Did you add something else to your, I guess, not client research, but the questionnaire that you sent out? Was that a part of it to maybe try and get a bit more information, but not I guess, break boundaries? Did that ever enter your thoughts?
Um, on my my video questionnaire is kind of long because it's driven to a big part of what I make when I make a senior film is going to be about that interview and about actually pulling out, like the more like the more nitty gritty, the details, right? Especially having the teenager be able to vocalize those details. So, with that, I want them to kind of be nostalgic and reflect on the past, and then I want them to be, dreaming and project on the future. So that's a lot long. That questionnaire is a lot longer. For photography, I really didn't change very much. But I also, again, you're putting in places in that client education, it's expectation setting, right? And i think I might have added at one point under it says tell me about your senior. Oh no, I know, at the very end, I said, is there anything else that I need to know to make this a successful photo session? And so again, it's not required. Most people just skip it. They're like, oh nope, already, saw this or whatever, or somebody might say, oh, he's got, football camp or whatever, like they might tell me a logistics, piece of information, or they might tell me something that's particularly important to the kid. So
Yeah, interesting. And you mentioned video. Tell us a little bit about your video work and what that entails, and what type of videos you do.
Oh, I love creating lots of different videos, and wish I had the time to do a lot more of it. But in terms of senior photography, and working with teenagers, almost no one in my industry was doing videos the way that I was doing them, right? And so this is, a lot of them would just be like really high quality footage and like awkward pans down the body, and stuff like, like be a girl laying in a field and now we've swept all the way across and we sweep through the grass. And I was like, okay. But no, my films are about the teenager themselves. So there's an interview aspect that comes in with it. And so it's their life in their own words. And sometimes we do that. It's what I call a hybrid. So in one session, I will both shoot stills and film video. And then, or the other one is like a standalone session. And the standalone session requires a little bit more planning because we usually hop locations and do a little bit more to really get into, who this kid is. But that's also a really can be a really high ticket product, right? Because you put so much time and effort into it. And so it's kind of like a culmination, film of like, okay, who are you? Who are you as a person right now? And where are you going, right? Who have you been? Where are you going? And they're always honestly just like tear jerkers. It's a milestone, moment. It's a celebration of a milestone moment. And so as a mom who, has already launched one and the other one's right on the heels and coming next year, I'm like, I want that. I want to celebrate my kids in this moment in this season. So
Excuse the interruption very briefly, but I'd like to just take a moment to introduce you to a partner that has supported this podcast for a long time now. And it's Yore, a brand that truly stands at the intersection of art and craftsmanship. Yore offers handcrafted jewelry and wearable pieces of art, some of which are infused with something extraordinary, moon rock. Yep, you heard it right. Yore's unique designs incorporate rocks from the moon into silver and gold, creating really special jewelry that's not just beautiful, but otherworldly. Every piece from Yore is ethically sourced as well, and it's locally handcrafted, ensuring that you're not just wearing jewelry, but an actual story, a piece of art, and a connection to something far, far greater. Whether you're drawn to spirituality, fashion, the art of meaningful adornment, or just feeling and looking epic, Yore offers something truly special. Plus, they offer free worldwide shipping, making it easier than ever to bring a touch of the cosmos into your life. As a special offer for my lovely audience of the Mood Podcast, you can click the link below in the description and use the code Art of Intent at checkout to receive a whopping 20% off your first order. So don't miss this chance to own a real piece of the moon and experience the art of intent with your rate. Okay, I'm done. Promise. I'll let you get back to it. Cool. And you talked about, I mean, putting a teenager in front of a camera for still photos is one thing. Putting them in front of a camera to do video is almost a leap in um, comfort that you have to kind of garner with them. Do you find? I mean, how much do you look inward in this process? I mean, I guess I could just ask you: are you an introvert or an extrovert, and how would that part of you relate to how you go about relating to your subjects and your process of doing video and photo?
Yeah. I've called myself an introvert for a very, very long time because um I don't love crowds. I don't love big rooms. And in comparison to my sister, I would say, okay, if both of us walk into a room and there are 100 people in the room, I was like, she will have 99 of their business cards or have at least like shake it, like shook their hand or, like chatted with them, just said hi, or something
It's
within the
annoying, isn't
hour.
it?
And it's a superpower, and I admire her for it, but I don't have that superpower. My superpower is if I walk into that same room of 100, I might find two people that I'm going to have a conversation with, and like probably offend my southern sensibilities because I don't just talk about weather. And, I'm like, I don't do small talk. Like I will actually be talking about real stuff, and because I don't know, small talk just doesn't do it for me. I'm not an introvert in that I don't want to just like I'm not recharged by like staying at home and reading a book, right? I have a kid who's very recharged by that pull in, right? I am actually recharged by connection. It just doesn't have to look like, 10, 15, 20 people. Like just having connection with one person is actually really recharging for me. And so, so even on a photo shoot, when I just have one person in front of me, I come home and it's hours before I can even wind down. I'm like, so, I'm like like the puppy at the end of the day. I'm like, oh, let's go.
Yeah. I know that feeling. I think people can often conflate introversion with not liking people or not being comfortable around people, and it's not the same. You can be an introvert but be very people centric, which it sounds like you are. I mean, portrait photographer, you've got to have good people skills and you've got to be enjoying that connection. It just doesn't mean that like you said, go and enjoy being the center of attention in a large group of people. But it's interesting. How does that shape your creative approach, being that type of introvert? I mean, I guess you base it a lot around just connection.
Yeah, I do. There's a New York Times best-selling author. He's wrote, I don't know, probably 8 to 10 books, something like that. He's written a lot of books, but what he writes about and what he researches right now is what he calls soundtracks. And these are the stories that we tell ourselves over and over, the repetitive thoughts that we tell ourselves in our head, and kind of how to break down some of the soundtracks that you maybe have had before, right? Like, oh, an introvert means this, an extrovert means this, right? And what I say instead, which is actually right to your point. And I heard this from just one of his videos at one point, and I was like, oh, that's exactly what it is my soundtrack is not I'm an introvert or I'm an extrovert. My soundtrack is I'm built for people. And so what like that's what I want to be doing. I'm not antisocial. I'm like I want to connect with a human every day, and knowing that about myself is hugely helpful, right? It influences, yes, how I go about running my business, because it can be super lonely, right? If you're a solopreneur and it's just you working. I'm sure you've had people talk about that level of loneliness that can be reached, or me moving across the country and not having a support system, not having my family there, right? That can also be super lonely. And knowing the piece about myself of I'm built for people really helps me to engage with the client who's in front of me, and see them each as a unique opportunity.
I think you touched on being lonely there, and I think that's an important point for people to understand. Actually, the irony is, it's very difficult for people to understand, even if you have a team around you, but it's your thing. No one really understands like why you work the hours that you do to get the smallest thing right, because they don't have the same investment in it, right? Emotional investment in it. So yeah, like a solopreneur is even photography generally, it's a very individual pursuit, right? It's you with that camera. Even if you have a team of other people around, it's still you with that camera making those decisions in the frame or whatever you might be doing. So it can be very solitary, and some people love that, right? But I kind of like you. I think you have to have a bit of both. I like to have my own space and my own creative thoughts with that camera, but I kind of need that connection as well. So it is interesting that you have that approach with business. Let's touch upon business a little bit. You've recently moved across country, and I want to talk about that in a minute, how that's affected your business. But tell me, a 30,000 feet view of your business and how you've created that over time. Tell me more about your business model, because I know it's not just about photographing seniors. Just give us a high level overview.
Yeah, the piece that you'll see the most, on my media, will be senior photography and videography. I also do fine art school portraits. So I photograph schools and several hundred kids every fall with it. I do branding stuff. I do brand videos, right? So there's this whole photography pillar, right? Photography and videography is one of the pillars. Education is another pillar that I love. I've had my own like do it at your own pace. I've sold courses and taught on webinars and podcast and speaking engagements and stuff like that. These conferences and stuff, and taught workshops and retreats and things. So there's the education piece. So there's photography, there's education, and then the last kind of umbrella, the piece that I actually really love is the mentoring and coaching kind of piece, and that's kind of consulting on operations, systems, workflows to help not just photographers, but a lot of creatives, because we all are using the exact same tools, and but nobody taught us how to use those tools, right? Like we learned how to use our camera, or we learned how to write, a beautiful essay, or whatever our creative endeavor is, and none of it, like I didn't become a photographer so that I could, figure out an email uh campaign sequence. Right? Like I'm not in this for web design, or like workflow optimization and stuff like that. And so those are areas that I happen to have a decent amount of skill in, and that I can also kind of come in and work with other photographers, other creative entrepreneurs who need some help streamlining things. And so that kind of coaching consulting aspect, I always call that being a business mom. And so I'm like, like, does your business need a mom? Do they need somebody to come in and say like, okay, this is where this goes. This is where this goes. In corporate, it would be called a COO. In entrepreneurial, it would be called an integrator, or sometimes like a really high level OBM. And so I do that, and I take those clients at different points in time, and so there's kind of a coaching and consulting piece too. So those are my three umbrellas: photography and videography, photography education, and then the consulting.
Cool. How do people find out about your, I guess, mentorship and coaching, and what structure does that take?
It can take a couple of different structures. Sometimes I'm hired for, like project based. Okay, we need to, like bring on a whole new system or something like that. I want to I have an online course, and I don't know what platform to use. I don't know how to, actually get it out into the world. I don't know how to sell it. I don't know how to run ads. So it can be project based. And I'm not doing this as much anymore, but at one point it was also, kind of like a part-time position, in a job. And so I've had a couple of people that I've gone in and worked with, for 6 months, a year, 2 years, and, just kind of keep running all of their systems and operations and kind of helping them optimize them. So it can look a lot of different ways, but I like it. It's very, very connected work for me. And it's also very, very freeing for for whoever the creative is that I'm working for, because then they're actually free to be the visionary of their own business and of their own, company. And they've got somebody else who's worrying about the nitty gritty that's, kind of in the background. So
Yeah. And so how does that business going to change, or it is changing now you've made that move from West Coast to East Coast?
yeah. So I'm not 100% certain that I have all the answers for that one yet, but I will say I do have my youngest kiddo who is, who's still on the West Coast, and so I am, I'm bouncing back and forth quite a lot, and so that we can spend time together and connect, and so yeah, so I still have my, I'm still licensed and have a business presence there on the West Coast with that. And we'll see. We're kind of coming to the end of what the natural senior season is anyway. So I always say, like, by November 1st, I'm done, with my photographing seniors. And so we'll see kind of how the next months shake out, because I don't know, the season might be very different here too. So might be able to do a little bit more. I don't know.
Mm, mm. What does the next few years look like for you? I think just settling into North Carolina again, and not growing business from scratch, but getting that business locally up and running.
Yeah, yeah, that could definitely be one of the things that it looks like. I have other, I don't know, I have ideas and some things that are kind of percolating back there that that won't, the idea that won't go away kind of thing. So we'll see. We'll see kind of where that lands. Yeah, I don't have all the answers for that one yet, which is kind of exciting and just a tiny bit
Yep.
terrifying.
Yeah. And the teaching side of it interests me. I mean, I do a little bit myself, and we talked about your mentorship and coaching, but when you say education, that's you going into, tell us a little bit more about the kind of in-person education side of it.
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways that can, that can look. So education business wise, right? Like the online courses. And so, senior photography that teaches you about posing and stuff, or senior photography that teaches you about the back end and the business considerations, or how to do video, or so I have the courses. That's a kind of a static online, doesn't have to be in person thing. I love, love, love to go and speak at in-person events, and whether that is like a retreat, a workshop, or a conference. Those are so fun. The energy is just bonkers. I love it, and I love attending. I love going and being able to speak. I love the connections that come out of it. Right? I have many dear friends now that I met years ago, at a conference or a workshop or something like that, and we've kind of come along in similar circles and stuff like that. And so that's what it looks like. Come to a class, and depending on what the workshop or the conference has requested, we will either be cameras in hand, all right, let's go actually create the thing, or lecture, in a hall, or a demo with a model, or any of those combinations. But it's always a dang good time. So it's fun.
before we um Before we wrap up, let's touch on gear quickly. If I'm right, you're a Nikon shooter. Tell us what gear that you have in your bag.
I'm a Nikon. Yeah, I've always been with Nikon. Um, Currently, for just a regular senior photo shoot, I wear a harness, to double harness, and I have two Z7 IIs on each. I have a Z7 II on each hip, and then I don't have to change lenses or anything throughout, and so just that much less that I have to fumble with. Yeah, I used to only use primes, and now I only use zooms. So I have a 24 to 70 on one hip, and then the 70 to 200 on the other hip, and it just really just lets me get Like I'm never inhibited by the capabilities of my gear, especially with video, which is awesome. The way the auto tracking for video has come along is just it's, it's beautiful. Yeah, I love that. I really do love that about my Nikons. So yeah, that's what I use.
Well, it creates incredible work. What do you think the secret ingredient, if you were to put one? I think we've probably answered this question earlier on, but if there was a secret ingredient that kind of made your work either unique or very attractive, and why people are drawn to you and your business, what do you think that secret ingredient would be?
It's got to be the people, right? Like because oh, what is that? What is that? It's an Annie Leibovitz quote, right? What you see in my photos is that I wasn't afraid to fall in love. And I'm butchering it, I'm sure, but that I wasn't afraid to fall in love with people who were in front of my lens. And I feel like that's probably what it is for people who look at my work too.
What a great answer! I love it. Thank you so much for being open and honest. Is there anything that else that maybe I haven't touched upon that we want to discuss, or that you want to say or talk about?
Gosh, not that I can think not that I can think of at the
Good. I've
moment.
done my job
I'm
properly then.
like, you did it wonderfully well. I'm like, I talked about everything.
Cool. Okay. Well, as long as you've enjoyed it as much as I have, thank you so much for joining me today. And hopefully, if I'm ever in North Carolina or Seattle, I think it was you were before, I will see if you're around.
Yeah, I'm a travel ninja, so you really just like pretty much if you're anywhere in the US, it's there's a chance I'll be there.
Okay. All right. Well, until that day, and I hope everything goes well for the new location, and I continue to enjoy following your work. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much.